Now, the effect to special summon a monster from the deck is one of the best effects in the game. So in this list, we'll go over some of the worst cards in the game that technically have good effects to special summon monsters from the deck. And at number 10, we have Dark Sage, one of the few monsters in the game that can special summon itself from the deck, as long as the conditions for its summoning have been fulfilled on the field. Now, this card has a really convoluted requirement in the fact that you need to have Dark Magician on your side of the field, who was there after you applied the effect of Time Wizard, in which you resolved its effect correctly, as Time Wizard has an effect where you can flip a coin and then call either heads or tails, and if you call it correctly, you get to destroy all monsters on your opponent's side of the field. But if you call it incorrectly, your monsters are destroyed instead, and then you take some damage to your life points. So, if you have two specific monsters on the field, and you successfully call a coin toss correctly, you'll get to tribute your Dark Magician to special summon Dark Sage from your deck. And when you do so, you also get to add any one spell card from your deck to your hand, which is another one of the best effects in the game. Now, the reason this card is at number 10 at the bottom of this list is because if you do pull off its effect, it's actually pretty good, especially since it special summons itself and allows you to search out any spell card. But the requirements are a little bit too ridiculous for it to be competitive in any kind of sense, especially since it requires you to get lucky and isn't a reliable summoning method. And at number 9, we have Crop Circles. This is a trap card that allows you to send a monster from your side of the field to the graveyard in order to special summon an alien monster from your deck, who has a level exactly equal to the levels of the monsters sent to the graveyard for its effect. So if you send a level 4 monster to the graveyard, you can special summon a level 4 alien. Or if you send 2 monsters, whose levels equal 6, you can bring out a level 6 alien. But if you fail to find an alien with the exact same levels, you instead take 2,000 points of damage. Now, this card is actually fine and everything, it's just there aren't really any good aliens that you'd want to use this card with. Generally, the best way to use this card would be to swap out a level 4 for another level 4, and the best one I can think of that you'd want to swap out during your opponent's turn from the deck is probably Alien Kid, who can give your opponent A counters during their turn. And if you want to combine low-level aliens to bring out a high-level one, the best target is Alien Overlord, who can already special summon itself pretty easily from the hand, and is not really the kind of card you need to special summon directly from your deck by getting rid of 3 resources for it. In order to go into Alien Overlord, you'd have to go -2 in card advantage, and Alien Overlord is just not worth that amount of effort. There are other high-level aliens, but they're not very good, and all of the low-level aliens are kind of similar in strength and power levels, where you wouldn't really want to waste a crop circle swapping them out, especially since aliens also have a good card that special summons aliens from the deck already, called Mysterious Triangle, where you can destroy 1 monster on the field with an A counter, and then special summon any level 4 alien monster from your deck. Mysterious Triangle is all pure advantage and is actually good, and can be used during your turn since it's a quick play spell card, whereas Crop Circles requires you to wait a turn and is an inherent -1. So you would just never play that card unless they released a really good low-level alien that you want to search out from your deck as soon as possible and during your opponent's turn. And at number 8, we have Gussto Falcon. Now this card has an effect that when it's sent from the field to the graveyard, if it was face up and it wasn't destroyed by battle, you can special summon any 1 Gussto monster from your deck in face down defense position. Now at first glance, this seems pretty good. It's a standard floating effect that allows you to special summon any Gussto from your deck, including the high level ones. And this card itself is a tuner monster, so you could even go for synchro summons and then maybe proc its effect. And you'd be absolutely wrong to think you could use it in this way, because this effect is worded in a way that it would actually miss its timing if you used it in a synchro summon. You see, this card has what we call an optional when effect to its special summon from the deck effect, where when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Gussto from your deck, and since it's optional, it can miss timing if something else happens immediately after it's sent to the graveyard. And since synchro summoning requires you to send cards to the graveyard as a cost in order to bring out the synchro monster, it will miss its timing as you have to activate it as soon as it's sent to the graveyard, and you'll miss that with the synchro summon monster coming out afterwards. It also doesn't work if this card is destroyed by battle, nor if this card is face down. So the only way to actually activate this card's effect is if it's sent to the graveyard while it's been face up on the field, and it was sent there by a card effect which doesn't cause it to miss its timing. So, if your opponent uses something like a dark hole on you, and you had Falcon face up, then you would get to activate its effect. Honestly, this effect is kind of difficult to activate on your own, because it misses timing so easily and has so many restrictions on it, especially since it's a low attack monster with only 600 attack. So it's not like you're going to normal summon this thing face up so that you have the chance to activate its floating effect. Honestly, the main use of this card is probably the fact that it's a tuner who can be special summoned from the deck with other Gussto monsters, and just used for synchro summons, and then maybe occasionally will allow you to float into a monster if your opponent tries to disrupt your strategies by destroying this card first. And that's kind of why it gets a low spot on this list, since it's still a little bit more useful than all the other cards on this list, even if it is still kind of an incredibly difficult floating effect to activate for how simple it seems. And at number 7, we have UFOroid. Now, this card is pretty simple, in that if it's destroyed by battle, you can special summon any machine-type monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck. And since UFOroid itself is a machine-type monster with less than 1500 attack, it can special summon other copies of itself from the deck when it's destroyed by battle. However, this is a level 6 monster who has this effect, and it's part of the Roid archetype, which is kind of one of the worst archetypes in the game, who definitely don't have a way to get this card out easier. And that's kind of why it's on this list. In order to bring out this card normally, you have to tribute summon for it, when it has an effect very similar to a lot of the other elemental floaters, who get to special summon a monster from their deck of their attribute as long as it has less than 1500 attack, whereas all of those are level 4 monsters and can be used directly from the hand. UFOroid is a high level monster for some reason, so the best way to use UFOroid would be to cheat out of the deck with one of the elemental floaters like Shining Angel, ironically, who can then bring out UFOroid from the deck if it's destroyed by battle, and really, if you need to bring out a machine type monster with less than 1500 attack, you're better off running one of the elemental floaters who happens to have the attribute of the monster you want. Which is usually not these cards at all, because they've been kind of power crept to uselessness. Monsters who only activate their effects when being destroyed by battle are just not very good in the metagame anymore. Doubly so when they didn't even see very much play when that was part of the meta, like in the case of UFOroid. And at number 6, we have Rosebud. This is a specific spell card that allows you to tribute one elemental hero no spay in order to special summon elemental hero Poison Rose from your hand or deck. Now, the thing with these cards is that they're not very good, and generally using an unsearchable normal spell card in order to tribute summon one specific monster to bring out another specific monster that's not even good is generally not very good. As the card it brings out, elemental hero Poison Rose, is a 1900 attack beat stick, which can't be brought out unless it's with Rosebud, and all it does is gain attack whenever it inflicts battle damage, and your opponent can only target this card with attacks. That is not at all worth its summoning requirements, and kind of makes it one of the worst elemental hero monsters. So, of course, its specific spell card that brings it out from the deck easily makes a spot on this list. However, these cards are part of the elemental hero archetype, and there's like 1 million support cards for searching these cards out, so it's a little bit more playable than some of the other higher spots on this list. And at number 5, we have Rainbow Gravity. This is a trap card which has the effect to special summon any one ultimate crystal monster from your deck or graveyard, ignoring its summoning conditions, which means you can bring out Rainbow Dragon with this card. However, this card has the requirement where you must have 7 Crystal Beast cards with different names on the field or on your graveyard in order to activate it. And until recently, there were only 7 Crystal Beast monsters in the game, with a new one being released called Rainbow Dragon, the Zenith Crystal Beast, which isn't even in the TCG yet. And of the 7 Crystal Beast monsters, 6 of them are pretty terrible. So if you just replace one of those 6 with the new one, that would still require you to play 5 terrible monsters in your deck in order to meet the requirements of Rainbow Gravity. Now, all you have to do is get those cards in the graveyard, so it doesn't seem that bad. Until you remember, getting 7 specific cards in the graveyard is incredibly difficult. So difficult that only being able to special summon a Rainbow Dragon for your deck for all that effort is not worth it. Especially since you have to play basically 5 bricks in your deck, which could muddy up your hand with mediocre cards that will just lose you the game. And that's kind of the crux of the Crystal Beast archetype though. A lot of their cards are just not super playable in the modern format, and weren't even that good back in the day when they first came out. Which is why requiring 7 cards with different names in your graveyard is a little bit too steep of a cost for a 4K beat stick. If they were to release new, better Crystal Beast monsters in the future, Rainbow Gravity might leave this list and actually be pretty good, but for now it squarely takes a number 5 spot on this list instead. And at number 4, we have Familiar Possessed Hiita. Technically, all of the Familiar Possessed cards make this list, since they all basically do the same thing with just different attributes, as what this card does is it can special summon itself from the deck once its conditions have been met, similar to Dark Sage. And all you need to do is have one Hiita the Fire Charmer and one Fire monster on your side of the field, in which case you send both those cards to the graveyard in order to bring this card out. Now, Hiita the Fire Charmer is a low-level flip effect monster who simply has the effect that when it's flipped face up, you can take control of a face-up fire monster your opponent controls. You know, as long as this card survives that battle. It needs to stay face-up on the field in order to control that card. So, it's already dependent on your opponent controlling a certain attribute of monster. But hey, there are ways to change your opponent's attributes around, so that's not a deal breaker. So the intended summoning method would be to use Hiita the Fire Charmer to steal one of your opponent's monsters, and then you send both of them to the graveyard in order to bring out Familiar Possessed Hiita. And what do you get for accomplishing this somewhat cumbersome summoning method? You get an 1850 beat stick who can inflict piercing battle damage. And that's it. Which is to say, not very good. Kind of on the terrible end of the spectrum, but hey, at least you can use this card from your hand as if it was a normal level 4 monster. It just won't gain piercing damage as its effect. Now, this card came out back in the day when piercing battle damage was only on low attack monsters, so having an 1850 piercer was alright, but wasn't even a big deal back then. So when they released the light and dark versions of this card later on, they gave them the added effect of being able to search out a spellcaster type monster from your deck, in addition to them summoning themselves from the deck and having piercing battle damage, which really helped offset the cost of how cumbersome these cards are to use. So really, only the original Familiar Possessed cards make this list, with them being some of the few cards in this game that can special summon themselves from the deck. And also keeping true to the theme that all cards that can special summon themselves from the deck are pretty bad. Speaking of cards that can special summon themselves from the deck and are also bad, at number 3, we have Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon. This card can special summon itself from the deck if you tribute a Red Eyes Black Dragon who is equipped with the specific trap card called Metal Morph. Now, Red Eyes Black Dragon is a level 7 Neuro monster who definitely requires resources to be brought out, so it's not an easy feat to get this card on the field. And Metal Morph is a normal trap card, which means it does have lots of search methods. And it has the effect where it can equip itself to one face-up monster you control, it gives that monster 300 attack and defense, and if your monster attacks into an opponent's monster, it will gain half the attack of the monster it's attacking during the damage step. So it's actually a really good card for beating over pretty much any of your opponent's monsters, and was a staple card in Duel Links during the early days of the game, because it's a legitimately good card. Now, Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon is basically a 2800 attack vanilla monster. It has 100 more attack than Metal Morph would give the original Red Eyes Black Dragon, and it doesn't have the good effect of Metal Morph of gaining extra attack when it attacks into a monster. So actually bringing out Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon would be a straight up downgrade to just keeping the normal Red Eyes Black Dragon equipped with Metal Morph. A card that's actually worse than the materials used to bring it out kind of has to make a high spot on this list, because at least the Familiar Possessed cards and Dark Sage are better than the cards that bring them out. Not the other way around like with Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon. Although I should say Metal Zoa should also take this spot on this list. It has the exact same conditions and summoning requirements as Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, only with a card called Zoa. And these are the only two Metal Morph upgraded forms in the game, and they're both pretty bad, but at least Red Eyes monsters have a mountain of support cards to bring it out easier. And at number 2, we have Bonding H2O. This is a spell card which requires you to tribute 3 specific monsters on your side of the field in order to special summon Water Dragon from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So this is an inherent -3 on summon, which, okay, that's pretty bad, but maybe the card it brings out is super good? Well, it definitely is if you're going against a Fire or Pyro deck, as while this card is out, the attack of all Fire and Pyro monsters on the field just becomes 0. So this is the ultimate counter to Fire type decks, of which that's probably the least used attribute in the game, and Pyro type is one of the least plentiful types in the game. And it also has an optional floating effect to bring out the 3 monsters used to bring this card out. And it's also worded in a way that it can miss timing. So that's a pretty good floating effect on this card. If it's destroyed, it floats into 3 monsters, as long as it doesn't miss its timing or get removed from the field in some other way. Now, to give this card some credit, of the 3 monsters used to bring it out, one of the cards, Hydrogenon, can potentially bring out other copies of itself from the deck, in order to make tributing 2 of them much more easier. Although Bonding H2O is still a really bad card, which is why when they released new support for this archetype, they created a brand new card called Bonding D2O, which just straight up replaces Bonding H2O, as it can bring out Water Dragon from the deck and treats it as if it was special summoned through the effect of Bonding H2O. And Bonding D2O still requires you to tribute 3 specific cards, although it does allow you to tribute cards from your hand as well as the field, so it's a lot easier to use, and can special summon Water Dragon Cluster, who is a much better Water Dragon that can actually float into 2 Water Dragons when it's destroyed. And Bonding D2O also has a graveyard effect to return itself to your hand if a Water Dragon on the field is destroyed. Now, if the original card was so bad that they created a brand new card that makes the old one obsolete, that kinda says something about how unfixable the original card was, and also why it takes the number 2 spot on this list. And at number 1, we have Magical Labyrinth, another specific spell card that summons 1 specific monster from the deck. Now, this one is actually a lot easier to use than Bonding H2O, as you just have to equip it to another card called Labyrinth Wall, who is a level 5 vanilla monster with 3000 defense. And if you fulfill these conditions, you can tribute Labyrinth Wall in order to special summon Wall Shadow from your deck. Wall Shadow is a level 7 effect monster whose only effect is that it cannot be summoned except by the effect of Magical Labyrinth, and has 1600 attack and 3000 defense. Now, here's the thing about Wall Shadow. It's not really an upgrade over Labyrinth Wall. Sure, it actually has attack points at 1600, but that's not a good attack point value. The whole benefits of using Labyrinth Wall is that it has very high defense for a 1 tribute monster. And there's even a couple of ways to cheat it out since it has normal monster support, whereas Wall Shadow has no such support, is much harder to bring out, and isn't even worth being brought out because you wouldn't want to put this card into attack position. There's no reason to tribute Labyrinth Wall for a 1600 attack boost, when the whole point of the card is just having high defense, which Wall Shadow does not beat. It has the exact same defense, so this could be considered a downgrade to Labyrinth Wall, despite requiring more conditions for its summoning. So this is kind of the case like with Red Eye's Black Metal Dragon, where the original card is probably better than the card it's bringing out, as even Water Dragon could float into 3 monsters when it was destroyed. Whereas Wall Shadow does nothing, it's just a defensive wall that has mediocre attack point values, which can be beaten over by pretty much any average level 4 or lower monster. Which is why I think Magical Labyrinth takes the top spot on this list, because its only effect is bringing out a card that's basically not an upgrade over the card required to be tributed, who itself is not very good either. Alright, and that's the list. If you think there's any other worse cards that should have made this list, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And did you know, only 27% of people who watch these videos are subscribed to the channel? So, if you enjoy these videos, you should probably subscribe to be notified when a new one comes out, as there is at least one new top 10 every week.